Good evening and welcome to tonight's AHDB Business Planning webinar. Thank you for taking the time to join us this evening. It's myself, Tess Howe, who's the Senior Skills Manager for AHDB, and I'm joined by Oliver McEntyre from Barclays. Just a little bit of housekeeping to get the evening started. All of you are listening and are muted. There is a questions box on the side of the screen, and if you have any questions at any time throughout the webinar, then please do tap in that question and we will be keeping an eye on those and we'll answer them as soon as possible. We're hoping that we'll be finished around 8 o'clock. If there's any questions unanswered, we will do our best to keep track of those and get back to people. But also the whole webinar is being recorded and will be available shortly on the YouTube and AHDB website as well. So just some basic introductions. I'm Tess Howe, working for AHDB, and I work across all of the sectors within AHDB, helping people develop their business and develop their staff management skills and the staff themselves. And I'm sat here with Oliver McEntyre, who's going to introduce himself.
Hi Tess, thanks for that. Good evening everyone. And again, just to reiterate what Tess said, we're delighted you can join us this evening and thanks for taking the time. My name's Oliver McEntyre. Some of you may know me, may have met me. I work for Barclays as their National Strategy Director, and I suppose my 2-minute CV is born and brought up on a small family farm in Lancashire, agricultural college, about 10 years managing farms. After that, about 5 or 6 years as an independent business consultant before I joined Barclays in 2006. Where I lent money for 5 or 6 years, and since then I've held the position of agricultural specialist and now strategy director for agriculture.
That's brilliant. So a couple of years ago, AHDB did a risk management program looking at supporting farmers on identifying their risks on farm and looking at how they could build the resilience of their business. And one of the results of that work was that we highlighted a large number of farms having no business plan or had not reviewed their business plan in any shape or form over the past few years. And we feel with the way that the market is so uncertain at the moment that it's an ideal opportunity for you as a farm to really look at where the business is going and how you can improve that business and especially improve the resilience over the next year or so. So this is why we're going to do look into business planning, and we've brought Oliver in here as an expert to help us bring you through the process. So what we thought would be interesting would be just to get an anonymous poll from everybody that's on the webinar about how many of you have an up-to-date business plan. So you should have the options on your screen, which will give you 4 different options about when you last produced that business plan. Was it in the last year? Was it 5 years, within the last 5 years, more than 5 years ago, or actually you've never written one before? Now, all the results are anonymous. We'll just get some percentages of who's got what, and they'll pop up on the screen shortly. We'll give you a minute to do that. One of the reasons we're interested in this is there's been some work done by AHDB, which is by the Farm Business Survey, that found that only 19% of farmers have a written goal or a mission, and we feel this is something that if more people had a consideration about where they were going with their business, then they'd actually be a little bit more successful with that outcome. Is that what you find, Oliver?
Yeah, I mean, what we find at the bank is usually when someone's got a project on or they're looking to expand, they will a lot of the time come to us with a business plan. And I think one of the sad things is you know, a business plan in the farming context is sometimes seen as a document for the bank just to get money, which to a degree it is. However, you know, every business should have a plan. Every business should have a model, and then they can monitor where they're going. They can plot their route and react when the market changes. Because the one thing we do know is the market will always change.
Definitely, never more so at the moment. And we're just waiting for those results to come in.
It'll certainly be interesting to see how many people are they on to do a business plan and learn about it, or are they on to brush up their skills and hone what they do?
Well, hopefully we'll see those questions come through. Okay, so Oliver, I'm going to let you digest those figures. We've got 25% of you have done a business plan in the last year, 23% in the last 5 years, 20% more than 5 years ago, and 32% never done one before. How would you think that fits across the broader population?
I would have said that's probably about standard. So obviously it's an anonymous poll. We've no idea of the drivers. I would suggest that probably those 20% that did one more than 5 years ago, that might have been a point where they spoke to their bank for some sort of large asset purchase or expansion. I think it's great that 1 in 4 are doing a business plan in the last year. And roughly that sort of in the last 5 years, so 50% nearly of the people on the line have done a business plan in the last 5 years, and like I say, 20% looked like that was possibly a trigger. The trigger was perhaps borrowing money. What is interesting is that nearly a third have never done a business plan before. Perhaps in the challenging and uncertain times we're in, it's maybe encouraging people to go, actually, this is something I really need to look at and really need to get a grip of on the business.
And hopefully for those people that have never done a plan and are thinking, I just don't know where to start, then hopefully this webinar will actually get people on the right road to drafting that first plan and working with their bank to take that forward.
Yeah, that'd be brilliant. Brilliant. Yeah.
Brilliant. And again, the reason that we're so keen that more people take these on is that we do see those that are setting their targets performing significantly better. So that's what we're aiming for by the end of the session. Yeah,
I think for me, Tess, it's all about having that. I always use the example of going on a long road trip to somewhere you've never been before in the UK. You pick out the route. Let's ignore sat nav for now, shall we? You pick out your route. You check as you're on your way, don't you? You don't set off to John O'Groats thinking, I think it's generally in this direction. Let's see how we get on. And a business plan's just that. It's your route map. How's the business functioning through the year? What can we do to improve things, and what costs perhaps are we not on top of, or and how can we tweak things to make things a little bit better and a little bit more cash generative?
And I think that's a key point there about tweaking it as you go through. This isn't something that is a plan that's written and forgotten about. It's definitely something that's a working document, which we'll talk about shortly.
Sure.
Okay, so let's get on to starting that business plan. So what will I need to get together if I'm going to start writing my own business plan? I'm going to sit down at my own kitchen table and look at this. So what kind of paperwork and people will I need to involve in the process?
So I suppose paperwork side, the starting point has got to be the most recent trading accounts that you have. That just gives you a handle on the starting point for the business. You'll need all the partners of the business sitting around the table. They need to be bought into that business plan, and everybody needs to agree it. Farming businesses can be hugely complex, with sometimes 3 generations of one family, perhaps even 2 families joining together, so that you need everybody bought in. We often see sole traders, obviously, but we often also see farm businesses that are partnerships between 5, 6, or even 7 different people. So you need them all gathered around the table so everyone can agree. Consultant, if you're using a farm consultant, maybe they're going to put the business plan together with you and help you get onto those figures. So that's always a good start. And probably most definitely initially just make sure the accountant's involved as well, just to make sure that your starting point is correct. I suppose there's also, we should just qualify a little bit here, Tess. It depends what that business plan is for. If this is a business as usual business plan, perhaps to renew your overdraft with the bank, or just to ensure you've got a
Okay, I think everyone's back online now. I can only apologise for the sound that keeps coming and stopping. I'm just going to change the microphone and see if that makes sense for everybody. So we're now going off the computer, so please do let us know if you're still struggling. I can only apologise. So Oliver, sorry, paperwork and people around us.
Yeah, you've got to get the right people around. Apologies if you've heard this 2 or 3 times in the last 3 minutes, but having had a perfectly functioning pieces of equipment for the last 2 hours, it seems to have waited till gone 7 to start malfunctioning. See some really complex farming businesses, 2, 3 generations of the family together. Everybody's got to buy into this business plan, because this is one big business coming together. Everybody's got to have that shared goal and agree it in good time. For me, you've got to have a starting point with any business plan. You can't just sort of pick some numbers at random from wherever you please. So the most recent trading accounts, is always vital. If you've got a consultant or a good working relationship with your accountant, they should probably be sat there to help you get the right. You've got to set off on the right foot of reasonable figures that are traceable, and you can, when the bank comes to ask you where you've got those figures from, you can point them out in your most recent trading accounts. So that's really important, to make sure those people are all sat around the table discussing it to start with. Everybody might have to go off in their own separate direction to actually deliver the business plan, but initially everybody needs to be bought into it.
Brilliant. And is there a good time of year you should be doing this, or does it really matter?
It doesn't really matter. It's a bit, if it's for a business as usual trading year, Tess, you've got, it should be your trading year as is, whether that's 6th of April to the 5th of April, whether it's 1st of Jan to the 31st of December. If you're actually doing something for a project, maybe some land's come up for sale, or you're going to expand a dairy herd or take on some more acreage, it's probably not going to happen at the time you really want it to happen and be available on day one of your trading year. Yeah. So what we see then is, say your trading year is 1st of Jan to the end of December, land might come on the market in April, May time. Your business plan might just be a little mini 7-month business plan that comes on stream as it was on the 1st of May. And then when you get to the end of the trading year, you can then just fit back to your usual 12-month trading period.
That's brilliant. So it's all sounding quite straightforward.
I think the other thing to mention, Tess, is it's always good to have some physical performance figures. It doesn't matter what sector you're in, whether it's lambing percentage, pigs per sale per year, tons per acre, litres per cow. It's always has to have a hook to hook that physical performance on. So anything you've got that documents that, whether that's milk statements, whether that's grain statements from the amount of grain you sent, something where the bank can actually get a real feel for the previous business physical performance.
That's brilliant. So if we start to get into a little bit more detail about what we're actually wanting in that business plan, so this is probably the little bit where people are not quite sure what they should be doing. Do you want to go through sort of the generic areas of what people should be covering in that business plan?
Yeah, for sure. So what should the business plan cover? Well, really easy. The first thing is you've got to almost have an opening statement. Why has the plan been put together? If it's for annual review of banking facilities, then that's fine, nice and simple. Business as usual sort of business plan we might see. If it's for some sort of capital item, purchase of land, purchase of more cows, whatever it is, investment in pig buildings, whatever it is, then if you set that out in the first sort of few lines, so the person reading it goes, right, I know exactly what this is about and what it's got to do. A lot of background, as it says up on the screen, a lot of background on the partners, areas, farms, farming systems. Is there a succession plan in place? We often commit money for 20, 25 years in agricultural banking. There aren't many other in the supply chain that will make a 25-year commitment on price. We do it regularly, week in, week out. Given if the farmer, the senior partner's 55, 59, I think the average age of the UK farmer is at the minute, that's a 25-year term. So we're going to want to know what the succession plan is, who's going to take over the business, a really good list of assets the business has, whether that's livestock, dead stock, whatever it be, land owned, land tenanted, what tenancy agreements are on those bits of land, so that we know whether they're AHA tenancies or FBT tenancies, or shouldn't be too many about, but there's still 1 or 2 bits of land that are on what I think we describe as informal agreements. So we need to know about that, because we need to know which business partner owns what. Some of them will be held in the business, some of them might be held personally by business partners. We need to know who owns what, so that we can fully assess it. Capital costs and list, if it is for a project, if you're putting a new building up, you've got to know what it's going to cost you. Have you taken everything into account? If it's for expanding a dairy herd, for example, have you got a cost in there for buying in cows, or have you got enough heifers following on? That means you don't need to purchase extra cows. And then just a little bit on what the plans are for the next 5, 10 years, maybe. What we don't want to do is help a farming business do the initial project and then find they're coming back to us for even more money further down the line. It's not to say that money won't be lent and won't be agreed, but actually if we're getting to the point where we're reaching a sort of limit of our appetite to lend to a business, it's no good coming out in 2 years' time and saying we want another 500,000, another million, because we might not be in a position to support you. So get all the plans out in the open, and everybody benefits from having a more fuller picture of what's going on. I've already touched on it, but the people involved, not necessarily the partners, but the management team, consultants, any contractors that are used, and then for me, just the operations, the suppliers, where do you buy all your stuff from? How are you selling things? What are the KPIs, the key performance indicators? What sort of cow yields are you going to get? Lambing percentages, tons per acre, tons per hectare, whatever you want to work in. And also, if we can have something that actually verifies that that's what you're doing now, that will give a bank manager far more confidence to say, actually, they're doing 9,000 litres a cow now. So this project can only enhance that. We've got that tangible evidence, if you will, that that's what's happening. So that would be brilliant. If there is going to be improvement, if you're going to go from 7,000 litres to 9,000, or 3 tonnes to 4 tonnes to the acre, that's brilliant, and it can happen, obviously, but we need to know why, because if nothing's changed, then it's not going to happen by magic overnight, is it? Something has to intrinsically change in the management of the business. And I think the thing to remember is, it's effectively a tender document, this. It's also a living, breathing document. It is going to change. One thing you definitely know, as soon as you click save or print on a business plan, it's all out of date anyway. Which I suppose some people might say, well, there's my argument. I don't know what milk price or grain price I'm going to get. But actually, what it does do is it shows a bank or an investor that you're in control of that business, and you're in control of the costs, you're in control of the outputs, and when milk price moves or grain price moves or fert price or feed price, you know exactly what that's going to do to your cash flow, which is obviously what banks get very obsessed about, and rightly so.
And you mentioned there's a lot of detail about the business, but as you've been my bank manager for the past 10 years and you know my business inside out, do I really need to put all that detail into that business plan?
I think it's good to document it. It also sometimes helps the partners to go, that was the direction we were in 5-10 years ago. This is where we're heading now. It kind of helps that. And I've referred to it as a tender document 2 or 3 minutes ago. That document can be used to go out and test the market and take it to other banks, just as you would if you were buying fertilizer, semen, feed, whatever it is. You should take a look and see what the market's doing and reflecting, really. So the more formal you can make it, the more buy-in you might get from interested parties.
That's brilliant. And if I've got 9 out of 10 of those items and I've just got one area that I'm just a little bit weak on, is it still worth coming to you with that business plan? Is that something you can direct us with?
So for me, I think, especially if it's just an annual review business plan, I say it's important to do it. But if it's an annual review business plan, as long as you've got it ready for when your bank comes to visit you and do their annual review, that's absolutely fine. If it's for a project, what I'd really encourage is actually just pick the phone up and tell your bank manager, this is what we're thinking, what's your view? They'll probably call in on the way past one day. They'll give you an opinion on whether they think it's a good idea or a bad idea from having that holistic view of the business for 5-10 years. But they'll also become involved in the process. So, our expertise is finance. So we can look at it and say, actually, very often we'll look at a business plan and say, you don't actually need to borrow this money over 25 years. We think you can pay it back over 15. Likewise, someone might come and want to pay back over 10 years, and we look at it and go, whoa, far too tight. You're not going to be able to manage that. Put it over 15 and let's see what happens. Get the right specialist involved in the right departments of that business plan. So, bankers' specialism is finance. So why wouldn't you chat to them early? I think if you got to the point where you've got 90% of the business plan there, you'd be very welcome, Tess. That would be a breakthrough. I think when you get to 60-70%, definitely be having a chat with your bank manager at that point, because they'll help shape and polish the final document with you.
Okay, that's brilliant. So that's some sort of generic information that we've covered. What about some sort of finer detail? Because I'm sure you want a little bit more facts and figures out of me.
Yeah, I think if we're sort of looking at what the business plan should cover, in an ideal world, a business plan should have a projected profit and loss in. It should have a balance sheet, and it should have cash flow. So just for those who are just a bit sketchy about the real definition of those, profit and loss is obviously would be a near replica of your taxation trading accounts. How much cash have you brought into the business through sales, and how much has the costs gone in. That would be your profit and loss. That's a statement over a 12-month period or whatever your trading period is at that time. Your balance sheet is a statement of assets and liabilities. So you would list all your assets from buildings, cattle, land, tenancy agreements, whatever it is, and then offset against that whatever debt you might have with a bank or traders or people like that. And that's a pinpoint in time calculation. It's of that moment whenever you do it. The cash flow for me is the one that bankers get really excited about because we're geeks like that. That's the one that tells us what's really happening. So the three should be interlinked really in a perfect world, but it's the cash flow that we're keen on, and that is anything that's real goes in the cash flow. So drawings would go in the cash flow. If you pay a direct debit out to perhaps an older generation who's retired, but they still take some money out of the farm, that needs to go in the cash flow because it's a real cash movement. Look at things like depreciation, doesn't go in because it's an adjustment in a trading account rather than a real cash movement. Any capital expenditure goes in there, doesn't go in the profit and loss account, but it goes in the cash flow. And obviously what a bank's looking for is if your opening balance on a cash flow statement is minus 10,000 and at the end of the year it's minus 30,000, effectively that business has gone back by £20,000 cash. Now if it's minus 10,000 and you close at plus 20,000, you've generated £30,000 of cash after all those costs have gone out: interest, capital, drawings, and all the other day-to-day stuff like feed bills and water, electric, power, etc.
That's all good for knowing what my costs are now, and you did mention projected costs, but obviously we're in quite a time of uncertainty at the moment with the way trade could go. So is there any way that I could use this to sort of protect myself and think it might look like a solid plan now to borrow £2 million, but actually with trading conditions changing so rapidly, that might not be right in the future? Is there any way I can protect myself with that?
There's a few things you can do, and that's a common bit of feedback you get from farmers. It's well, I don't know what I'm going to get for my milk or my grain or my lambs or whatever next year, and yeah, we know that. I'm often asked what milk price should go into a business plan or grain price. The only answer I can give you is just put in what you're getting now, and then we can see what we can reflect on that. What you should build into it really is a sensitivity analysis, so that if milk price drops by a penny a litre, what does that do to your income lines? If the grain price drops £20 a tonne, what does that do to your income lines? But also you need to build in some of those key inputs. So obviously in the dairy sector, you'd be talking probably livestock sector full stop, especially pig and poultry. You would be talking about feed price, quite a key one. In the world of arable, you're probably talking fertilizer price, perhaps diesel price. What happens if the diesel price moves? And what effect that will have on the money going out of the business. So it's not just about all the income. And actually, if you start stretching that down on the standard costs that you've got, that you've sort of migrated across from your trading account, if you keep going down and down, eventually you'll get to a cost of production and a break even. If you do it on your cash flow, which, as I've already said, includes all those real cash movements. So if you can go to a bank manager and say, here's the plan, I can pay you back, because guess what, all business plans say they can pay you back. I can pay you back, and actually if grain price goes to £112 a tonne, that's the point at which I break even after paying you back. That's great news. Or if the milk price goes to 21p, I can still pay you back. That music to a banker's ears, to be honest.
That's brilliant. We've got a good question from Matt here. What about a balance sheet when actually it's a new business?
You've still got a balance sheet, to be honest, Matt. Really good question. It's not going to be the strongest balance sheet, but you've still got a balance sheet. Don't forget what I said about balance sheets. It's a pinpoint in time. The profit and loss account is a set trading period, usually 12 months. The balance sheet is what assets does that business hold at that time, and what liabilities does it have? Therefore, what's that business worth? So what in a banking context, what we like to see is a balance sheet that grows and grows each year, because what that means is you're generating enough cash to pay everything, including yourself, but you're also keeping a bit of cash in the business as well, so that it builds the net worth of the business. So what I would say is, if you are looking at putting together a new startup business, put your balance sheet together. You must have some asset behind you, even if it's, and I don't want to sound glib, even if it's 12 sheep, you have an asset. And if you owe 50 quid to the local merchant, take that off, that's your balance sheet, and that's your net worth. When you get to year 2 and you've got 30 sheep, your net worth has grown. That's a great message for a bank manager.
That's brilliant. And if you are that new business, how many years would you sort of look at your projected cash flow? What would be realistic?
Excellent. It's almost like you can see my notes of things I've got to say. Thank you. So I've written in big letters on my notes, how long? How long do you do about a business plan for, and especially a cash flow? So it's a little bit piece of string answer. So if it's just a straight annual review, you do it for your 12-month trading period with your bank if you need overdraft, or you just want to work out whether you've got enough cash in the bank to get through the trading year. For that new startup, which is the same as a new investment on an established farm business, my answer would be to probably project as long as it takes for you to start seeing a return on that money. So if you're going to invest, let's say £50,000 in year one, you're probably going to have to do a projection in the way agriculture is with its long lead-in times, at least 2 years, probably 3. I think if you're looking at an investment on farm, or you're looking at going out and taking a tenancy on and buying stock and investing money in stock, I think if you start to get up to 5 or 6 years of cash flow before you start to see a return, it's probably a bit of time for reflection. And is this actually a wise use of money? And could you be doing something else with that money? But the very short answer, which I'm not renowned for giving short answers, the very short answer is you work the cash flow through for a project or business startup until it starts to be cash positive.
Okay, that's brilliant. And another question that I think it's coming as from Ian, is it, how does a young person borrow money without assets? But I think that actually could be for anybody involved in farming.
Yeah, you don't have to be young. That's a good question. Very common question. But if we step away from agriculture, let's say I wanted to start a hairdressing business, and I walked into a bank and said, I've got no assets. Can I borrow some money to open a shop on the high street? I need this much for the lease. I need this much for equipment. Then I'll have to pay people while I get going. Guess what? The bank's going to say no then as well.
Yeah.
So it's not an ag-specific issue, although I think sometimes in the industry it's seen as an ag-specific issue. My advice, if you're looking to start up, is start small, work, have a job. You are very lucky if you can start a business on day one and earn enough money to live off. Most people I know who started their own business, whether it be farming, agricultural, whatever it is, usually end up working full-time and starting the business at the same time. So start small, build up the asset base from the balance sheet. The joy of things like sheep is, pigs, they can multiply up quite quickly. Build that balance sheet. What you're also doing then is you're building a track record for the bank to see your determination and building that business and building the asset base. So that would be my answer to that. Start small, build slowly, and when you've got an asset base to leverage, then go back to the bank and say, this is what I want to do next.
Okay. And Molly's asking about templates to help with these business plans, and they're actually going to be on the HDB website shortly. We're just working on building those at the moment to help people that haven't done this or want to look at a different way of building their business plan. We're going to have those available shortly. I'm just going to take one more question on this, and then we'll carry on. Liz has asked about joint ventures, and how would you use those if you're entering into a joint venture? What information would you
I suppose
have?
the most common example that Liz hasn't put on there what it is, but the most common example would be a share farming agreement of a JV, joint venture. For me, I think that becomes a slightly more complex banking proposition. What we'd look at there is, and bear in mind we've talked a lot about the markets and how everything can change. We're basically, a lot of our lending decisions are being made on the person sat in front of us, because as I've already jokingly said, we can, a business plan always shows a profit. It's not much good putting one in front of a banker that says you can't pay us back. So they're always going to show a profit. It's up to us as a bank to lend responsibly, see that we think the people sat in front of us asking for the money can actually deliver. So it's about giving that probably more detail on the partners and the people involved in that scenario, track record, what they've done. And, you don't need to be a farmer's son or daughter and have that track record. Those of you out there who are perhaps in, herd manager, head tractor driver, farm manager positions, keep that track record. Try and get involved in that business as much as you can from a financial point of view, because that will then develop track record you can take to the bank and say, this is what I've done for the last 20 years. Now it's time to strike out on my own. So quite difficult from the JV point of view, but probably pull both sets of accounts and say, right, what are your skills?
Yep. And we've got here, what profile of grant income should you include in the business plan?
So banks like grant income if it's true grant income, i.e. it doesn't need paying back. It can add a valuable tilt onto some projects. Certainly we've seen it with the technology and agri-tech innovation grants we've seen, especially robotic milkers. We seem to have seen a lot of those. If you're getting a grant, let's say the project's 50,000 and there's a 40% grant. Wish I hadn't started doing mental maths live on a webinar, but there we are. What did I say? 50,000 and 40%. So you're going to get about a £20,000 grant. So if you've got a £20,000 grant, put it in the business plan. On an agreed grant, if you can have show your bank manager a letter saying, because most grants you've got to pay out before you claim back. If you can show your bank manager a letter from whoever the grant issuer is saying that the grant's been approved, that they will bridge that payment as well. Just on the understanding that if they put the overdraft up by 20, they are going to expect to see the overdraft go down by 20 when the money comes in.
Okay, that's brilliant. And we've got somebody answering here, would a uni rent tender exercise be a good place to work from for a new venture?
Would a what? I missed that.
A uni rent tender. So somebody who's done an exercise at university.
Oh, I see. Yeah. Not being a college boy, I don't understand these sort of short uni things, you see. Just a common oink, that's me. Yeah, really good place to start. Probably for me, we did do a bit of case study stuff and a bit, business planning and tenancy applications, even in the dim and distant past when I was at Ag College. Probably more detail than your banker might want. Remember, we're all busy people. What we want is bullet points, get to the point. What do you want? Sounds brutal, and the relationship with your banker's more positive than that. But a business plan when it's for finance is almost like a job interview. You've got to think of it that way. You're applying to borrow some money, so it's got to grab the attention of whoever's reading it. So really good place to start. Really good that hopefully they'll have been at uni and taught to tie in the cash flow to the balance sheet to the profit and loss account, and then actually just build from there. But probably less words in it. I think more bullet points would be my guess from my experience. Although if any of my college lecturers are on from 30 odd years ago, they'd say I didn't do any writing, it was all pictures, but there we are.
Okay, so we're going to move on now, and I think one of the things is we've talked a lot about facts and figures and information that's to hand or we could get, but is there any risks to doing this? Have you, in your experience, is there any sort of common issues that you've come across that once a business starts getting down into the nitty-gritty of what it wants to do and where it wants to go, does that cause any issues within the business itself?
It can do. What we all know is that, and we've alluded to it already, very little in control of the individual farmer and the individual partners in a business. You can't look at last summer. Who would have thought in the UK we'd get a summer like that and everybody's panicking that we can't grow grass? Probably one of the best grass growing countries in the world. Look at what's happened to the pound since the referendum result came in. It's sunk to the floor, which has been really good for agriculture. We've seen prices drive on the back of that, so you can adjust your business plan for the increased income you're expecting. I suppose for me is just don't fluff the numbers up. Agricultural bankers are usually very experienced. They know their market. If you're telling them that you're producing 3 tons to the acre and suddenly the business plan says 4, give us a reason as to why that is. Because all that happens, it's a dreadful phrase, but one we used to hear at school, if you cheat, you're only cheating yourself.
Yeah.
This is a document it's not just for the bank just to get that money. It's actually a document for your business that helps you, guide you, helps get through those difficult times, and also helps you have a really good conversation with the bank. The milk price has dropped. I'm going to need another £20,000. That's a really impressive conversation for you to pick the phone up to your bank, rather than the bank ringing you up and saying, I'm really sorry, but we're going to have to return checks today because you're way over your limit.
Yeah.
So it's a far more positive thing than that. I think for me, you can project your farm gate prices. Nobody truly knows crikey. If we all knew what was going to happen on the commodity markets, we wouldn't all be working for a living, would we? If we're honest, we'd be living on some desert island somewhere. I feel quite sure. But just reasonable assumptions. That's what it's got to be. Do not over egg the pudding. Do not overstretch yourself. Because as I said before, what we're doing with the business plan is we're actually, in a nice way, we're judging whether the people showing us the business plan can actually deliver the business plan. And if it's too stretchy, then it won't be delivered, and then you're probably not going to get the finance that your business more than likely deserves.
And what about a contingency figure? Is there some kind of magic number that you would put into there to sort of buffer things?
Yeah, so if you're doing some sort of development, expansion, infrastructure investment, you would probably want to be looking at a 10-15% contingency, just to make sure that if there is an overrun in the project, and the classic one on farm developments and farm buildings is they start digging out for a new shed and discover that they've actually only got 12 inches of topsoil, 12 inches of subsoil, and the rest of it's hard granite, and it's suddenly going to cost 40,000 to dig it out more. If you can put 10-15% contingency funding in, again, it's an indication of the management of the business. You've thought about it. You might not need it, you might not draw it down, you might not use it, but you've thought it's possible. Something could go wrong. Look, if you're doing building, anybody who's done a building project in winter knows how quickly it can just go off track, anything with the weather. So yeah, just that contingency, 10-15%. And also just make sure you've thought of everything that needs to be put in front of a banker. If it's a project that needs planning permission, have you got planning permission? We can't fund something that doesn't have planning. We'd be helping you to break the law, so we're not going to do it. So if you need planning, come to us with the planning, or at least tell us when it's going to come through. Just little things like that, and it's that attention to detail that gives a banker real confidence in the management ability of the person borrowing the money.
I know when we did the risk management work, we talked about building a risk register. Is that something you would like to see in a business plan?
I think it's good to identify. I mean, I'm a big believer in SWOT analysis, which is strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. I think they're really great one-page documents. They don't need to be detailed. I mean, my colleagues will tell you mine are never detailed. They're usually about 3 words a bullet point. But just sit down before you start, before you invest. What are the strengths of our business? It could be strong family relationship, lots of experience. What are the weaknesses? Well, we only produce milk, or we only produce grain, so if that drops, we're in trouble. And what are the opportunities? Expansion, whatever the project is you're doing, and what are the threats? When you start sitting down and putting down those threats, it is going to be things like farm gate price, trade deals, disease, whether that's animal or plant. And if you've assessed that and put that as a separate sheet in your business plan, it saves your bank manager work because you've thought about it for them.
Okay, and we've got one question in from Brian here. Would you use realistic figures, or would you just go on the pessimistic side? How do you feel about either of those?
Oh, glass half full, glass half empty. I think realistic I'm happy with, as long as you've got a sensitivity analysis in there, Brian. So if you're talking pig price at 135, that's a reasonable pig price. If you're being very pessimistic, you might put it in at 120. If you're being over optimistic, you might put it in at 150, 152. Our job as responsible lenders is to actually, for want of a better phrase, sniff out where there might be a few discrepancies. So for me, realistic figures with a sensitivity analysis. If you're not going to put a sensitivity analysis in there, then I would probably err on the side of pessimism, if I'm honest.
Caution.
Yeah. Risk management.
And we've George is commenting that the biggest problem to establish the estimated cash flow, particularly overheads and direct costs with reduced livestock numbers. Who would be able to help him with that kind of calculations? That'd be one for speaking through with the bank manager, would it not?
It would be. I mean, for me, my background pre-bank was putting together business plans, did a lot of grant applications. For me, if you are going to reduce your livestock numbers and you want to see what that looks like from a cash flow point of view, I think you've got to pro-rata them down, pull out those variable costs. So as you're talking about livestock, your variable costs are going to be your feed, your fertilizer for your grassland, contractors, bedding, that sort of thing, and just pro-rata those down. Because actually all those, the fixed costs, as we would call them, the bill for water, the machinery you're going to use, etc., they'll also probably pro-rata down a little bit, but not as quickly as the variable costs. So, if you're halving the size of your sheep enterprise, then half the cost of those variable costs going in.
Brilliant. So you've referenced quite a few times about this being a live document, a working document, and it's open to change. But what do you actually mean by that? How am I going to change it once I've written it and given it to you? Why would you want me to change it?
So I've already touched on it is a working document. I think it's tremendously frustrating for us as financiers that, very often they are seen as documents that are just to get money out of the bank, and then we'll tootle off and do our own thing. It's not going to work like that. If you're running a modern business, if you think of any of those big name businesses in the UK high street or around the world, they will have great relationships with their bankers because they need to, because that's what they need to help their business function, just as if you're borrowing money in agriculture. So for me, it's a living, working document. It's something you can revisit with the family, with the partners, something you can revisit with your accountant, your consultant, and very much something you can revisit with your bank manager. When should you revisit it? Depends on your sector. If dairying, you're getting a monthly milk check, you should probably do the monitoring monthly. In the arable world, maybe quarterly would be enough. Again, pigs, probably monthly again. Beef and sheep, quarterly would be my guess, would be absolutely fine. However, if you've set yourself a target of spend per month or a budget to spend each month, maybe you should just record it every month, and see how you're going. When should you talk to someone about it? Probably when it just begins to go off track a little bit. You should talk to the partners. You should have a look at those cost lines, see which ones are higher than you thought they were going to be. Have a little investigation as to why, not a witch hunt, just a little investigation. Maybe one of the partners has been out and bought way too much straw, or got them forward, bought spray for next season instead of just this. So there might be a perfectly good explanation about it. If it still doesn't start to correct once you've had a little investigation the next month, probably then is the time to talk to your consultant, talk to the accountant, and very much talk to your bank manager. Because as I've already said, you being proactive and talking and having a great relationship with your banker and saying, look, we think we're a little off track, can you come out? We'll just have a chat about it, because if it carries on like this, we're going to need more cash, more whatever. Then that's a really, really impressive conversation to have. And don't forget what I said at the beginning. It is like planning a journey in a car with a traditional old map, showing my age now. With a traditional old map, when you go past the services or you get off the M6 and get on the M5, whatever it is you're doing, you check on the map that that's the way you're going. And that's just a car journey for your weekend away or the family wedding or whatever you're doing. Here we're talking about businesses with millions of pounds worth of assets. Why wouldn't you monitor that? Why wouldn't you protect it?
So I think we've got some questions in again from Martin. Is the bank confident about agriculture? Where do you see the future of land value?
We're very confident about the future of agriculture. It's a hugely resilient industry. I actually think in the current process we're in at the moment, agriculture is really fortunate because we have the agriculture bill. Some people might not like it, but we have it and we know the direction of travel. And we've also got that transition period to 2027. So we know what's going to happen. We know when it's going to happen by. So we've got our direction of travel. Many other sectors have nothing like that. For us as a bank, agriculture has always been one of our key industries. It's a huge part of Barclays UK. Those of you who've heard me do the odd talk here and there will know that I usually talk on about how our first deal was in 1744, our first agricultural deal. You're talking heading towards 300 years of experience. Long before we were in, out the EU, we've had world wars, Napoleonic wars. You go and look back, and it has always been a favoured sector of Barclays. We're confident about the future. I think we're not naive that there are going to be challenges ahead, and people, through seminars like this, people are going to have to get a better grip on the business they're running. As I've already said, you don't need much of a farm to be worth £1 million these days. That's a huge asset. You've got to look after it, and you've got to get that stewardship for the next generation to be able to take it on. Where do we see land values? We probably better people to ask are the land agents up and down the country. Are we comfortable with land values where they're at? Yeah, we are. Do we see them contracting hugely? No, I don't think we do.
Okay, and just going back onto the monitoring, what you've seen other farms doing it, how do they actually monitor it? Is it a formal report to you, or is it something quite simple they can do in the office, whiteboards?
It's these days computers offer us so much opportunity for data. And data is hugely important, but it's got to be good data. It's not worth having churn. If you're on one of the accounting packages, and you're putting invoice in, maybe you've got a farm secretary, maybe one of the partners is sort of office based and does that. Even with making tax digital is going to be brilliant. Everybody's going to find out what a spreadsheet geek I am tonight. Making tax digital is going to be brilliant, because what you're actually going to have is monthly management accounts. There will not be a business in the country, when everybody's on it, that can't provide monthly management accounts, which banks will sometimes ask for. I suppose what is frustrating, sometimes we lend money on the condition we do get monitoring information, so that we can tell you it's still on track. If you do, and it's part of the agreement, just stick to the agreement and monitor it. It's not a huge thing, especially if you're doing back monthly. It's all there for you.
And another question from Martin: have the banks got downloadable templates for business planning?
I can't speak for others, but I'll be really honest with you, Martin. I don't know. If we do, it will be a generic business one, not one that's specific to agriculture. I know we don't have one on the agricultural website pages on barclays.co.uk. Really, what I would say is, do not be frightened of opening Excel, starting on the left, putting your income in, and then start putting all your costs down, then put your months across the top. Most of the best business plans we see are business plans that the farmer and the partners have been hugely involved with. And you know what? The bank manager's not going to care whether it's got, super duper colours, or this page links onto that page and there's a lovely, beautiful colour scheme as the years go through. What we're actually bothered about is the figures. Are they realistic? Are they timed correctly? Are they achievable? And can you afford what you've asked for? Because that's what responsible lending is all about. Just lending money that can be easily, comfortably paid back within the business plan. So don't worry about it looking too can't think of a PC word now, too perfect. What we're interested in is the figures. Yeah, and with that in mind, then HDB is actually looking at creating some templates as well. Perfect.
So, and we're planning on having the text there, and then a checklist as well, so that it makes sure you don't forget what is actually supposed to be in there once you get down to the details.
Yeah, I suppose that would be my emphasis, would be just remember what each one does. So the balance sheets are statements of assets set against liabilities. The profit and loss projection is what you would more or less look like your taxation accounts that your accountant puts together for you. The cash flow, if you were going to come with one document to a bank, come with a cash flow, because it's a very old adage, but cash is king. We need to know what's happening with the cash.
Okay, and Richard's asking, on a 5-year cash flow plan, would you assume BPS to go to 0 in year 5? Would similar environmental payment assumption in year 5 be questioned?
So a 5-year, I could be obtuse here and say it depends when the 5-year business plan starts. We'll assume this year, Martin. You can tell it's getting late now. I'm getting rude to people. If it's this year, Richard. Sorry, it's so rude. I can't even remember people's names. Sorry, Richard. If it's a 5-year business plan, if you look in the text of the Agricultural Act, there is a very clear pattern for reduction of BPS. It is only I have seen business plans this year that are putting BPS in at a flat rate beyond the time we know it's going to start reducing.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So immediately, alarm bells, really responsible just to put it in at the levels you think it's going to be at. Your secondary comment about environmental income, I think you would be right to question that. What you've got to remember is BPS money is, even if you use a consultant to do your claim, is probably 95% profit, if you will. I know it doesn't work like that, but the cost of getting that money into the business is minimal. What you have got to question is, whilst we move down this, public money for public goods, the cost of that environmental income will be much higher than the 4, 5, 6% than it costs. I know it's more complex than that. You've got to farm the land, etc., to get BPS. But you just think of some of those capital grants under countryside stewardship for hedging, planting hedges, double fencing, dry stone walls. There just isn't that level of profit it is. So I think you're right to question that.
And for startups, would you suggest attaching personal assets or make a limited company so that partner financial security is ensured? Is there a preference by the banks for
So I think if I understand the question, really good question. If you are coming to the bank to borrow money, it can't all be at the bank's own risk. So if you want to put together a limited company but keep your assets out of it, so that the bank lends to the limited company, your options for borrowing money are going to be less. Otherwise, it's the bank taking all the risk and you can walk away. Limited company means exactly that. Your liability is limited. you can walk away and just fold the limited company. So you're going to find it a tougher conversation and a tougher ask to borrow money. If you want to put some of your personal assets or do it as a sole trader or partnership, you have that sort of joint and several liability within a partnership that means that should something not work out, the bank would have a call on your personal assets. So I guess that boils down into how much money you want to borrow, how much of your own personal asset base you're prepared to put up. But just, I think the thing to be aware of there is, the bank will not take all the risk, especially if they know you've got assets in the background that you could use to put up that business. Yeah, it's your business. Why should the bank take 100% of the risk?
And in a similar vein as well, hoping to enter a share milking agreement, would it benefit me to buy the young stock to bring it in to show the bank that I've invested my own money in starting this business, as I've heard that banks are unlikely to loan money to share milkers?
Okay, so whoosh, about 8 interesting points in that one. If you're going to buy the young stock, if I was your banker, I would be asking you how much money it's going to cost you to get those cows up to calving, because that's tied up capital that you could be using for other things. If you're going into a share farming agreement, you're probably better off buying more of the productive cows rather than something that's going to be productive in 12, 18 months. If it gets in calf, if it's all right, if it doesn't go lame, if it doesn't drop dead, especially as a business startup, concentrate your investment money on something that's going to give you a return straight away if you can. I would disagree that we're not likely to lend to share farming agreements. It's effectively a tenancy agreement as far as we see it. We support the tenanted sector. Do we lend up to the same exposure levels in the tenanted sector or the share farming sector as we do in the owner-occupied sector? No, we don't, because our asset, our security in the owner-occupied sector is farmland. Can't go anywhere, can't drop dead on us. It's a really strong asset. When we look at the tenanted, rented sector and the share farming sector, where our security is going to be machinery, it's going to be crops in the ground, crops in score, it's going to be livestock. So they're a less tangible asset. So we're not going to lend up to the high levels that we would against land. However, we will lend against stock as an asset.
Okay, and in that, following on from that, what percentage loan to equity would be a typical sort of lending ratio for arable land?
Excellent. Yeah, I'm just a really good question. So we will lend very comfortably up to 60, 65, even 70% of the total value of the land. The reason we start to struggle above that is if you buy the arable land and you buy it today and it's got a bit of winter cropping on it, and then you've got to go out and plant it, and we've lent to 95% of the value of that land, and then we get the same summer we got last year. Let's say it's really light sandy soil, all the crops keel over and wilt in the heat. We've then got nowhere to go in lending that business any more money because we're right up to that asset base. So I think if you're sitting against tangible assets like land, you probably want to be aiming for that 60, 65%. Banking's a risk business, so if you reduce that risk, the more likely the answer is going to be yes. It's got to be a sustainable business model, but if your loan to value's 30%, it's a far easier conversation than if it's 80%. And same goes for some livestock, machinery, etc. We won't lend up to that 60, 65%, but 30, 35% should be comfortable.
Okay, I'm going to move us on to the summary because I'm conscious that we're coming up to 8 o'clock and we promised everybody we would stick to an hour. Any of the unanswered questions, then we will do our best to get back to you with those. But just in summary, I think from what I've been understanding, and it's been a brilliant hour, Oliver, I can't believe it's been an hour already. But in summary, have a realistic and an achievable plan? Yeah,
I think so. I can get a little tongue in cheek, especially at 8 o'clock on a Monday night. But if you're fluffing the numbers up and you're only cheating yourself, and a good agricultural banker will spot it a mile off anyway. So make it realistic, make it achievable. If yields are going to increase or efficiency is going to increase, explain to us why. It could be that one of the next generation's been traveling the world looking at different agricultural systems. Could be investment in tech, in kit. Could be anything. But we do see improvements, but we need to know how.
Yeah, so that's making sure that everything we've been through today is written down in that plan, and that we're really confident that whatever we've written in there for you, we can actually deliver realistically. Monitoring progress, we've talked about how important that is as well, and how we should do that not just for you as the bank manager, but also about our own management and keeping on track with that investment. And if anything goes wrong, then we've got to communicate those issues.
Communication's just huge. Sorry to interrupt you, I'm getting into this now. We might be here till 10 o'clock. Communication's the biggest thing. Even when communication when things aren't going well is the best communication. Everybody likes to hear of a success story, but if the conversation is, hi, it's all going brilliantly, I don't need anything, that's a great conversation to have with your bank manager. A real quality conversation is, hi, something's not right. We think we know what it is, but we need to have a chat. Is an equally good conversation to have, because it shows us you're in control of your business.
Brilliant. And just to bring it to a close, the AHDB is currently in the process of planning a range of regional face-to-face meetings to help people with business planning, and they're going to be quite practical workshops where actually you will walk away from that day with a very rough outline of your business plan. So it helps you get involved with some expert support as well. So they will be advertised shortly, and we have had questions that we're going to let people know when the templates, etc., are available on the website and when we've updated that. So hopefully, if we've got the right permissions, we'll be in touch shortly explaining all of those templates and showing you how to use them. So any questions that you do have, feel free to get back in touch with either myself or Oliver, and we will help you or point you in the right direction as much as possible. But thank you very much, Oliver.
No problem.
Thank you all for your patience with those sound issues that we had at the beginning, I look forward to working on this in the future.
Absolutely.
Thank you.